today we are talking about choosing your wedding venue. This is one of the most exciting parts of planning a wedding, and also one of the most intimidating parts.
Yes.
And, I remember when we were getting married, it was literally the first thing we did. I proposed, and then a week later, your mom was in town, and we were looking at about 40 venues in a weekend. And I know me, as the groom and as not a planner, I was just so overwhelmed by it. I just, I just got very, very overwhelmed.
So overwhelmed, you think we looked at 40 venues?
Exactly. It felt like 40 to me. And then I think a lot of people feel the same way. I mean, it's a big portion of your budget. It really sets the momentum of the day because it's where most of the activities are happening. Yeah. And the way it looks and the way it feels and the flow, and the energy ultimately. But before we dive too far into how to find your venue, the first decision that really creates a lot of angst is where, location-wise, are we going to get married? Yeah. I know I'm from Alabama, and you were kind of from everywhere, and we ended up settling on New York. But it did take some time to kind of decide where would we get married. So and so my question to you is, how do you recommend couples kind of break that decision down?
Yeah, so I mean, I think traditionally it always was the bride's hometown, right? But now people are breaking the mold on everything. So there's really no set rules. So you can kind of look at where the both of you are from, and then where both of you live, or if you have a place that's super, special to the two of you. Maybe you met in Colorado, but you live in North Carolina now. But find those different options and then weigh the different options. So how many people are local in the city that you're getting married? Are you guys local to the city you're getting married? If not, how do you feel about planning a destination, planning from far away? That means time off work to travel for trips and tastings and things like that to consider. Do you have that flexibility at work? If you would prefer to be in your, plan the wedding where you guys live, the two of you, does that mean everyone's going to have to travel? That's going to limit how many people can come. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with, not having your parents in, hometown, which means they might miss out on some meetings and things like that. So those are kind of the questions you want to ask. Make sure, I would start with the two of you, make sure you guys feel really confident in your decision, and then go to your parents and let them know, like, hey, this is where we're leaning and this is why, and get them to buy in that way.
No, I think that's great advice. And I know for us personally, at the time living in New York, that's kind of where our life as adults and things like that began. So I think that's why it was so important for us.
Yeah.
So perfect. So no, I think that's fair. And again, I remember it creating a lot of angst, and as you're starting to bring families together and everyone kind of has thoughts and opinions.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important to start and have that conversation just the two of you before you get other opinions too.
Yeah. No, I think I agree. Okay, perfect. So we've decided where we're going to get married.
Yeah.
When should you start your venue search?
So everybody wants to jump into the venue search the second they get engaged,
we did.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But there's a couple of things that you really need to do before you get too far down the line. So go ahead and start looking at Bustld or Instagram or whatever to start getting venue ideas. Start saving.
Definitely Bustld.
Start saving photos and websites and things like that you like, so you can have kind of an idea while you're doing some of the hard work on the front end. And some of the hard work on the front end is getting an initial idea of your guest list. You got to know how many people approximately you're going to have. A 50-person wedding versus a 250-person wedding is a big difference in venues.
And that's something we talked about earlier. And if you haven't listened to the first one, then definitely encourage you to go back, because guest list does impact budget a lot.
It does. And that's the second thing is budget. So you want to have an idea of what your budget is, and you want to know, is it set in stone budget? Is it flexible budget? I know we talked about this, but you certainly don't want to go into a venue and book it and spend 75% of your budget on just the venue,
right.
Because then you're going to be over budget for sure, Yep. So get those kind of big picture things taken care of, and then start looking at things that you like. Do you want to be centrally located in the city because you have a bunch of people traveling, so you want like lots of hotel options and things like that? Or do you prefer to have a country club, or maybe be outside of the city so that you can have something that's a little more, you know, outdoorsy and barn? So start kind of trying to limit that down, and then start looking for your venue.
So don't just book as many appointments as people have available and then just start driving them everywhere.
No, I think you'll become very overwhelmed quickly. And so really, I would recommend, I would really, really recommend that you do your research and do your prep work. You know, reach out to the venues you're interested in, find out about, you know, what's included, what does cost look like, before you start scheduling site visits. And I would recommend scheduling no more than 3 to 5. Really limit it down. And after you see those 5, if it's still like, hey, we haven't found the one, then start doing more. But if you try to see 10, 15 at a time, you're all going to start to look the same.
Do you remember how many we saw?
Yeah, it was like 4.
It was only 4?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So you might have multiplied that.
I might have exaggerated a little bit, but it felt like it.
And there you go, guys. So don't see more than 4. You'll feel like 100.
Okay, perfect. So then, so I think you already kind of touched on some of the venue options. We're going to go to Bustld. We're going to go to Instagram. Maybe talk to friends, things like that.
Yeah.
Any other ideas?
If you haven't been to a lot of weddings, you know, I think that looking visually at different pictures of all different types, you know, ballrooms, country clubs, barns, outdoor, garden, like kind of getting a feel. And then also, you know, just kind of thinking about like logistics. If you're outside at a garden, you're going to have to rent a tent. Does that stress you out? You know, if you're inside at a ballroom where you have hotel rooms, does that make you feel more comfortable because all your guests are going to stay there? So think about like the pros and cons of all the different types. And then I encourage you to like maybe look at, if you're like, oh, I like the idea of a ballroom and a barn, there's no rule that says you can't see both of those things. And when you walk in, kind of get a feel for what it feels like for you guys. Yeah,
I think that's really good advice. And I think another thing to consider too is be almost self-aware of kind of who you are as a couple, as a person, whoever's kind of leading the planning of the wedding. Because I remember when we were looking, we looked at a blank space. And I just remember thinking, I don't know how to handle that. And I remember not wanting you to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Just because it just the complexity of it all.
Yeah. So, I mean, think about those things. And, I mean, you also want to just have realistic expectations, too, when it comes to budget, like we talked about. If it's something that's all-inclusive, you know, maybe the price is a little more expensive. But in reality, you know, it might fit into your budget better. But keeping those things in mind as you start looking is super important.
Okay, perfect. And then kind of piggybacking off of that, so you find your 5 or so that you're interested in. How do you start comparing them?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because not everything's the same. It's not apples to apples.
It's not. Which is what I wrote, apples to apples. But it's not apples to apples.
It's not. And so, I mean, I would encourage you, once you see the 5 or, you know, you site visit a couple, take your top 2, maybe 3 options and start really comparing them. So if one option includes, you know, venue rental and catering and bar and tables and linens, okay, that's, you know, X dollars. But then the other venue only includes venue rental. Okay, so we have to bring in tables and linens and catering and bar, get a couple initial quotes and really see like how do these actually compare cost wise. But I mean, at the end of the day too, your venue is also going to set the tone for so many things, like you said, like your style and the colors and what's going to look good in there. So, you know, definitely keep in mind the budget, but also keep in mind that this is going to set the tone of how the rest of the wedding is going to look and feel. Yeah, it's kind of interesting thinking back on our wedding as we kind of navigated this. You think about from where we were in the beginning to where we were in the end, and then obviously with Bustld and Something Perfect and the like. Thinking about the full picture, you know, when you're first looking at venues and you're first starting out, you know, you don't think about, okay, where will the DJ or the bands go, or where will the cake go, or okay, where will the guests stay, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. It really is. You really have to have a clearer picture before you start setting out looking to hire vendors, unless you're hiring a planner. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, shameless plug, but a full service planner can help you with all that. So if you're going to hire a full service planner, or you think that it's something you're interested in, I would recommend you talk to them before you get too far down the venue search, because they can help you build that budget and let you know, they can help you build that comparison of what the costs are going to be like. Sure. And then work through the logistics too. You know, if you're thinking about hiring a band and you're having 200 people in a space that allots for 200 people, you may not have room for a band. So different things like that, they can kind of help you think through, which are super important on the front end.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have this one amazing caterer that I have to use. That's one of the most important things. How does that affect my venue search?
So you definitely, I think that's a great point, is before you get too far down the venue search, if there's anything that is super important to you, make sure you're keeping that in mind throughout the planning process. Like you said, I said a band or an amazing caterer, you want to make sure that when you're looking at the venues, they're going to be able to allow for that. So some venues are exclusive caterers, some venues have in-house caterers, and then there's some venues that you can bring in any caterer. So that's going to be a question you're going to want to ask on the front end to the venues, so that you don't even waste your time or their time to bring those people in if that's a non-negotiable for you.
Perfect. Which then that's a great segue. So should I book an all-inclusive?
So I think it depends on the type of person. An all-inclusive can be great, and I think it depends, on how all-inclusive it is. What does that mean, right? But it depends on the type of person you are and how personal you want to make it, how many things you want to bring in. If it's all-inclusive and chairs and tables and linens and all that stuff is included in the price, but you have your eyes set on, bringing in ghost chairs, it's going to be hard to justify that cost, knowing that that's already included. So, keep that in mind as you're looking. All-inclusive can be a great option for people who, are trying to save money, because typically it is a little less expensive. And then also just making things a little bit easier, because everything is all under one roof. Yeah,
I think that's good advice. And then I alluded to it earlier, but what about a blank space?
Yeah, well, personally, I love blank spaces, right? Because you can really, really personalize it. A blank space can look boho chic one weekend, and then, whimsical and gardeny the next weekend, and completely traditional the next weekend. So I think that's the really cool part about that, is that you can really, really customize it. And if you can bring in whatever vendors you want, you can change it up, and it's not going to be the same thing as every single weekend or the night before or anything like that. So I think that can be really, really cool, but it definitely makes sense to have a planner who can help you with that, or to have a really good vision, because it can be really overwhelming for couples who don't see that vision and walk in and there's just 4 blank walls. Right. Right. No, of course. So I guess, so what are other things to consider there if you are leaning towards blank space? I think you just need to think about what all is included. Like, if it's literally just blank space, then you need to think about the fact that you have to bring in every single vendor, which is another vendor that you have to, all those vendors that you have to not only meet and contract with, but you also have to manage them throughout the planning process. And then also having a really good idea of your vision. So you want to know what colors you like and what you're going to bring in, and think about drapery and lighting and flowers and all of those things that will make a big difference in the room. Blank spaces can be beautiful on their own, but usually you want to kind of bring in some decor to really up the game in there.
Sure. No, absolutely. And then in terms of some of the important questions to ask when you're trying to choose a venue, what are some of those kind of key things that you would want to focus in on?
So anything that's super important to you guys, like we talked about, do you have any restrictions on vendors? Because I have this great caterer I want to bring in, or we're planning, we really want to get ready at the same space. Is there a getting ready space for both people in the couple? Is there any kind of sound restrictions or time restrictions? Maybe you really want your party to go until midnight, 1 in the morning, but the venue only allows music until 10 p.m. That could be a big deal breaker. What about other kind of restrictions? Sometimes venues restrict, you can only do beer and wine, or you can do, you have to buy the liquor through them, or you can bring your own liquor in. So those are things to ask about. Also, any kind of additional costs. So usually tax is an additional fee. Is there gratuity? Is that going to be an additional fee? If so, what is that percentage? Do you have to pay for security? Or, maybe they have in-house linens, but you have to pay for them. So what kind of additional costs that aren't included in that kind of initial lump price of the venue rental? I think that's really important to understand. And then also understanding what the payment process is like. It's also important, is it a 50% now, 50% later? Do you pay over the course of the year? How do you pay? Credit card, check? Those are all kinds of logistical things that you want to think about as you're booking that.
Yeah, no, I think those are all great questions. And Bustld should probably put out some top questions to ask.
Yeah, I think we might have that, so we can definitely link to it.
Perfect. Well, okay, so kind of wrapping up here, okay, so we've got some key questions. We have some ideas here. How are we going to walk away now? What are our couples going to do when they log off and they're going to start looking for venues?
So first and foremost is have that kind of discussion about where the city, right, and the types of venues and anything that's non-negotiable to you guys. I also think it's always good to kind of prioritize what are the 3 most important things. So venue is super important, or decor or style is super important. Definitely you want to invest a little more in that. And then you also want to kind of walk away figuring out budget and guest list. And once that stuff is done, then you're going to start looking at your venue search. So go on Bustld and take the quiz, and then we'll connect you to top people. Start looking at their storefronts and Instagram to get an idea of what it looks like. If it's the same every single weekend, what are the customizable options if you have something specific? If it's different every weekend, what does that mean you have to bring in? So start thinking about those things, and then reach out to a couple of your favorite venues and set up site visits. That's the best thing to do, is just get in there and walk into the space and imagine, like, this is wedding day, this is what it's going to feel like with all my friends and family here.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for answering all the questions on all things venues. Thank you guys for listening, and we can't wait to bring you our next topic in about a week.